Welcome to part 2 of 2 of our interview with filmmaker Brian McDonald. In addition to being a filmmaker and a screenwriter, Brian is also an author, and he's authored several books on storytelling, including Invisible Ink and The Golden Theme. If you want to check those out, you can find them both on Amazon. He also has a blog called the Invisible Ink blog, which is a great read and highly recommend checking out. If you missed part 1 of our interview with Brian and you want to listen to that, you can find that on episode 28 of the 2020 Awards podcast. You told me once that you used to do stand-up, and that you said you kind of gave up when you saw Chris Rock.
Yeah.
And it was kind of because you realized you had nothing to say, or that, or maybe I'm paraphrasing or getting it wrong, but that was kind of the gist of it. That you were trying to make people laugh. Chris Rock was trying to communicate an idea through laughter.
Yeah.
And that was when you were like, oh, I can't
do what that guy's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw him before he was famous. I saw him at the Comedy Store, and nobody really knew who he was.
Yeah.
And I saw this guy. I was like, oh, that guy's for real. Yeah.
He's not writing jokes.
Yeah, he's doing something else. And now I have some perspective on why I wasn't able to do that. But I wasn't able to do that, and in some ways I wasn't willing to do that.
But it's kind of the same thing in the way that, and having worked with you, I used to crank out every stupid idea that ever came into my head. Mm-hmm. Having now met you and worked with you, I'm far less productive. Because I have the same thing where it's like I don't want to write something down until I know what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And that slows your pace down.
It does slow your pace down.
But I do wonder if because maybe that's why I liked the book, is because it's like, oh yeah, no, I get this. Because I've watched so many movies that are sort of about cultures besides or outside of what my culture is.
Right.
And I can't get into them, and it's always because they're busy telling me this is what it's like to be me, but it's not what it's like to be a human being.
Right.
And so it's like I find it it's like I wish I could get into your plight, but you've kind of excluded me because you left mankind out of this. And when I say mankind, I mean woman.
Right, yeah. But you've
Thanks,
left.
Chris.
You've left. Yeah.
Totally agree.
But you've kind of you've segregated your audience by making it about yourself.
Right. Instead of finding that common threat.
Right.
It's funny because a friend of mine, friend of yours, Marcus Donner, he's a photojournalist. And when I told him the Golden Theme, and I told him about it before I had written the book, and he was a photo editor for a long time. And so, he would have to put together a bunch of pictures to make a story. And he said it was really interesting because he goes, I wish I had known this, because the thing that made somebody able to identify, he goes, let's say you had a story where somebody had to walk 5 miles to get water every day or something in Africa someplace. He goes, if I could find a picture that reminded people of themselves, like dad helping a kid tie his shoes,
right,
all of a sudden people connected to that experience because everything else is so foreign to them.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? So he's like, oh, if I could just have told them that, find that thing, then it would have been easier for me. So it is interesting because, I'm always looking for that thing. What's the human thing?
Right.
And even if I'm writing a villain, right? I mean, especially if I'm writing a villain.
Well, you want them to... You don't want the mustache twirling.
Right, yeah.
You want to see their point of view and understand why they're doing what they do.
Yeah.
Which raises...
And see a little of yourself in him.
Yeah, exactly.
Which actually raises my last point that I wanted to talk about. A lot of the stuff that you write is kind of fantastical.
Right.
You've written about reincarnation. You've written about alien cops.
Right, yeah.
Spiritual, paranormal investigators. But the great thing about all your stuff is it always feels very grounded. Mm-hmm. And I've been very moved by a lot of the stuff that you've written, and it's almost like, oh, I can relate to this, but I'm not alive in post World War I.
Right.
I don't have a friend who's from outer space.
Right.
But I think that's what it is because it's always the material underneath, the carriage of the piece is always something that's very universal.
Yeah, I think that has something to do with my Rod Serling thing.
Sure.
Right? That Rod Serling, the Twilight Zone is very fantastical and crazy things happen. But in the end, it's about very human things. It's why people can't redo it. They get caught up in the fantastic aspect of it, and they don't tell the human aspect of it.
Yeah.
But the thing that makes it resonate is that it's human, and that the motivations are human, and the experiences are human, and I mean, at their core. You know, there's a great one that Rod Serling didn't write. It was written by what's his name, George Clayton Johnson, and really great one about a woman who's hiding out from death.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's one of my favorite episodes of that show. And she's all alone in this place, and she's hiding out from death, and she doesn't want death to find her. She doesn't want death to... And well, the fear of death is... I mean, you can't get much more human than that.
Yeah.
You know? And I can avoid it. I can... You know, there's lots of stories about...
Cheat death.
Yeah. And there's tons of stories about people trying to cheat death, right? Sisyphus, who's rolling a boulder, that his punishment is for trying to cheat death. He tried to trick Hades and try to sneak out of the underworld. I get it. I think he got out for a little while and then got pulled back in. But yeah, there's lots of stories about that, and the stories all end with you can't cheat death. You know, you can't cheat it. It's coming. It's coming for you. What you do with that information is your own business, but it's coming. And so, because it's a universal thing, how do I avoid this? How do I avoid this? Like, well, you can't avoid it. In fact, the oldest story we have, written down story we have, is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in that story, Gilgamesh's best friend dies, and he doesn't believe that. First of all, he goes, well, he can't. Maybe he'll come back. Maybe he can't believe in it, which is a normal response to death, right? It's like when somebody close to you dies, you can't. It's weird, but you can't comprehend it.
Yeah.
And then he figures out, well, wait, you know, and he doesn't bury his friend, and his friend starts to rot, and he goes, okay, this is, you know, and he buries his friend, and he realizes, oh, this is going to happen to me. And so his whole journey is trying to figure out how to avoid this. And
in the process, not living.
Yeah. And learning that, oh, you can't avoid this. This is just what happens.
Right.
So in the very first story, that's the story we tell. So it's an old story, which in my mind makes it a great story. It's an old story. It seems to be a universal thing, this universal fear of death, and how do you deal with it, and how do you cope with it.
You write about heaven.
You're right.
You make everybody think there's an afterlife.
Well, that's
a lot of people come from. They created a god in the sky.
Yeah, well, that's another story, another discussion. But yeah, so my point is that sometimes the fantastical can make things more real. Mm-hmm. Sometimes because it takes things out of the specific.
Right.
When you get specific, then people go, well, I don't agree with those politics, and I don't like that guy, and I don't blah, 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 blah. But if you make it animals or something, then people can somehow, they're disarmed, and they'll, you know, like Rod Serling said about creating the Twilight Zone. He said, well, I knew that I could have aliens say things they wouldn't let Democrats and Republicans say.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. And so I tend to do fantastical things because I think it's a spoonful of sugar with the medicine.
Right.
But also every time... One of my favorite Twilight Zones, I forget the name of it, it's when these biker guys come and move into a neighborhood.
Oh, right.
And Shelley Fabaret is the teenage girl next door who kind of falls for one of these rebel bikers. And they're aliens.
Right.
But it's basically like, you know, here's some new people coming to town and we're going to hate them because they're not like us.
Right.
And they prove themselves right, and the aliens are like, people here are worthless.
Right.
Know?
And that happens a couple of times on the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, a couple of times.
Monsters do on Maple Street.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens a couple of times where we're, you know, I mean, that was a big thing with Rod Serling. He was a big thing on, like, racism and prejudice. He thought it was, like, that was his big cause.
Wouldn't he be made, instead of, like, there's black people moving next door, there's aliens moving next door.
Yeah. But it was
or there's
a big
white,
thing.
handsome bikers moving next door.
Yeah, he really...
They're not one of us.
Yeah. I think the war affected him in a way that in fact, it's interesting. Gene Roddenberry, who did Star Trek, and Rod Serling, who did Twilight Zone, both were in the Pacific during World War II. Rod was on the ground, and his stories are way more grounded in a way. You know, the Twilight Zone happens mostly on Earth. I mean, there's some space things, but mostly it's on Earth.
Right.
Whereas Roddenberry was a pilot.
Oh, interesting.
writing his stuff. But they
Yeah.
both sort of learned the same lesson about humanity and about the best way to be a human being. They both sort of figured that out there, I think.
I was going to ask you to
Part
talk
two.
about a topic very near and dear to your heart, dialogue.
Oh, dialogue?
Yeah.
Dialogue. Dialogue is interesting because it's mostly what people think screenwriting is. And when I talk to young screenwriters or new screenwriters, or sometimes critics, they talk a lot about dialogue. And they say, oh, that had good dialogue, right? This movie had good dialogue or bad dialogue or whatever. And it's sort of, in a way, it's like it says, well, you don't really understand what screenwriting is. I mean, you can't say that to people. I'm saying it now. But
But to no one specific.
Okay, nobody listens
nobody
to this.
listens to it.
So it
No
doesn't matter.
screenwriters.
Yeah. But, to concentrate so much on dialogue, they don't talk about character. They say dialogue.
Yeah.
They're not talking about story. They say dialogue. And usually what it means is that dialogue really stood out. Mm-hmm. Those people were funny or clever or smart or whatever, and that dialogue stood out above and beyond its real, purpose.
Yeah.
Right? I never hear anybody say that had really good dialogue because I got a lot of exposition and I didn't realize I was getting exposition. It sounded like natural speak.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I never hear people say that's good dialogue.
Yeah.
It was really good dialogue because they were having a conversation about one thing, but the subtext was amazing. They were talking about, I never hear that about dialogue.
Right.
All I hear is,
It's funny.
it's funny, and the quips, right? These sort of things that...
They cussed a lot, but it seemed okay.
Yeah. Things that steal focus from the story in a way. I think some people use... First of all, it's in some ways, it's the easiest thing to do because it's the most surfacey. It's the most... You can hide behind it. Look, I'm writing well because, it's the fireworks of it. It's like, you're not really writing well. You're writing obviously.
A lot.
Yeah, you're writing a lot.
You're putting
so that
words
people-
on paper,
Yeah.
but not setting a scene.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
all the screenwriters that people say are really great screenwriters right now are really good at making dialogue that stands, that steals focus,
Right.
For
Draws
example.
attention to itself.
draws attention to itself. Yeah.
Well, you were at that. There was some film we went to, and I told you afterwards. I thought, oh, okay, I think I got this figured out now. I overheard somebody as they were leaving the theater say,
oh, right.
"Oh, what did you think?" They said, "I thought the script was really good, but I didn't think it was well directed."
Right.
And I was like, "What the hell does that mean?" Like it seemed like a really weird, specific comment, and then it suddenly dawned on me: people, I think the script is the dialogue, and that the directing is the story,
Right, I think that's true.
and they don't think that it's setting the scene or the tone or getting a performance out of an actor
Right.
or setting the pace, but they actually think it's the story.
No, I think that's true. And it's funny because a lot of people, Billy Wilder's one of my favorite guys, if not my favorite director.
He
filmmaker.
wrote great dialogue, by the way.
He did write great dialogue. and people talk about his dialogue a lot.
Yeah, they do.
But they don't talk about...
That was a joke.
I know.
A joke.
It's a meta joke.
It's a meta joke, yeah.
People talk about his dialogue a lot, but his dialogue was always functional. Mm-hmm. And his stories were really good. He was really good at constructing stories. And because his dialogue was I don't want to say showy because I don't think it's showy.
Snappy.
Yeah, it's snappy. Because it's snappy.
But I think that's why people like it.
Oh, I think that is why
Yeah.
people like it. Well, Double Indemnity, right? This is, apparently it's the first movie where it has all the elements that people think of as a noir movie. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard. But it's early in the noir thing. And it's co-written with Raymond Chandler, and Raymond Chandler's known for that detective-y narration stuff. But here's what's interesting is that when people try to write dialogue like that, they try to recreate that, they can't seem to do it. And I think they can't do it because, and this is true of the screwball comedies in the 30s, and they had this sort of witty dialogue, but the writers were actually trying to communicate something that code said they couldn't say. So if they wanted to talk about sex, they had to talk around it.
Right.
And so it ends up being very clever, and they find the ways to do that. And so because they're solving a problem, I think that the dialogue serves a function. It makes sense. When you're just trying to recreate the style,
right?
It doesn't. It doesn't work because you're not solving a problem.
Right.
So I think that's what Billy Wilder was doing in Double Indemnity. At one point in the movie, he says this guy's selling insurance to a woman, or trying to sell insurance to. Well, he's given up that idea. Now he's just hitting on her, and she says something about him selling vacuums or something because he's selling insurance, and she makes some joke about selling vacuums. I don't remember exactly. And he says, "I used to peddle vacuums." He goes, "I didn't make a lot of money, but you learn a lot about life." When there's a whole lot going on there, right? There's a lot. So it didn't feel out of character. It didn't steal focus from the scene. But it's quippy, you know?
Yeah.
So I understand how people get focused on it, but he was really good at constructing stories. And I think that's why his career lasted as long as it did. That's what he was good at. I mean, The Apartment, which I think is his best movie, probably. I mean, you could make some arguments for a couple other ones, but I think it's his best movie, probably. And has great dialogue in it, but the dialogue is it's not that it's snappy. It's like, in the movie, Shirley MacLaine plays a woman who's having an affair with a married man, and they're using Jack Lemmon's apartment to have this affair, and Jack Lemmon works for anyway, if you don't know The Apartment, you should. So, but at one point, Shirley MacLaine is crying, and she says to herself something like, "When am I going to learn never wear mascara when you're dating a married man?"
Oh, that's good.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's gorgeous. And it says a lot.
Yeah.
It isn't just clever in the surface sense. It says a lot about her experience and how she feels about what's happening to her now.
It's probably happened before.
Right? It's there's more going on there than it's not just quippy, and it's not just stealing. In fact, it pulls you into the story, not out.
Yeah.
Right. And it becomes not about the writer, which is interesting. It becomes about the character.
Mm-hmm.
Where other writers, I won't say any names, make it about themselves right
now.
And it doesn't pull you in, it pulls you out.
Right.
Pulls you out to go, what a great writer that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, I should say, if you've never seen The Apartment, don't make the same mistake I did. Which is, it's in the comedy section of your local video store or Netflix affiliate. And it's not really a comedy. It's funny.
Right.
But it's not really a comedy. And so you go in with that preconception that it's going to be a barrel of laughs. And I had to go back and watch it a second time to appreciate it.
Right. Well, the thing about Billy Wilder is this. He said this because Billy Wilder he tried, I think, to write the truth. And sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's not.
Sure.
And he didn't know whether he was writing a comedy or a drama until he showed it to an audience. And he goes, if they laughed a lot, I called it a comedy.
Right.
He wrote a story.
Yeah, he just wrote a story, and sometimes things were funny in it.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's something we're not used to anymore.
Right.
I think there used to be... Actually, I think they were much more sophisticated about that before. Even Chaplin, who's known as a comic, had a lot of pretty tragic things in his pieces. And I think that we only separate them now in a way to put them in a section right. And so we think that, well, it's a comedy. You can't have anything tragic in it. Not really. It's like, no, you can.
Yeah.
And it makes it deeper. But I think that's almost lost.
Yeah. Last thing real quick, hopefully, that I want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Plot versus character.
Oh, right. The plot versus character thing. It's funny. There are people who say they're good with character. Oh, I'm good with character, but I'm not good with plot, and whatever. And they're not thinking about it correctly because character and plot are exactly the same thing. Character creates plot, plot creates character. They are hand in hand, so that Hamlet has a plot, right? But its plot is driven by that character and by what that character believes has happened and what that character's belief system is and his contemplating what death is and what life is, and right. So they work hand in hand. And if you think of them separately, I think you're not thinking of them correctly, and you're losing the strength of the other thing.
Right.
So there are people who are like, oh, plot. That's like, but plot is what keeps people going. That's what keeps people interested in the other thing.
It's interesting. I think that nowadays we seem to have one or the other, and it seems like Hollywood can write plots, and indies can write characters. Yeah. But for some reason, we've lost the ability to put the two together.
I think that's mostly true.
Yeah.
I think, well, obviously the Hollywood system, they just want the sugar. So give me the, hey, give me the robot turning into a truck, and we'll call it good. And and I think that independents looking at that said, well, we're not going to do that. That's ridiculous. And
it seems to almost be a knee jerk in the sense of
that's what I think too.
Yeah, so it's like, we don't want sugar. Sugar's bad for you.
So I think they have an equal and opposite reaction that is just as bad often. That it's all like, this movie bores me to tears. Didn't you think it was great? It's like nothing happened. Yeah, it's about people hanging out in a house, drinking beer, having a thing. Like, that's not a story. I don't know why I had to watch that. It's like, yeah, but it's real. Life is like that sometimes. Sometimes you just sit in a house and have a beer. It's like, that's not a story. Why are you,
Okay, soon.
Or it's quirky. Oh, it's good because it's quirky. It's like, quirk is a thing, but is it helping you tell your story, or is it just a way to substitute not having a story?
Distract you from a story.
Yeah. But the guy's got a quirky character. It's like, I don't care.
He didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Except for crack jokes.
Yeah. Or there's an interesting thing talking about people not inviting you into your story. There's an interesting thing I don't understand. And it's never been explained to me in a movie, and that is this. When I was a little kid, I didn't have a bedroom, and we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and my mother and my sister shared the bedroom, and my brother and I slept in the living room on a couch, and we often didn't have food and all those things, right? So anything you can think, just that's the way we lived. I didn't know that wasn't normal. It was just the way we lived. It wasn't like, oh, what a great, I didn't like not eating, but the other stuff just seemed fine. My brother and I had a good time, like hanging out on the couch and talking to all hours of the night about what we were going to do when we grew up and blah, blah, blah. But I see a lot of independent films by people who had a completely different life, right? A life in the suburbs, and and I go, and I don't know what their angst is about. like, ooh, I gotta, it was like,
Dad wants me to go to college.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
I want to go on a date.
Yeah.
With a popular girl.
Yeah, it's like, I don't understand that. It's universal enough as an experience that they make a lot of movies about it, but I have never been let in, and I go, what are these spoiled people complaining about? And there's a lot of movies about them. There's a lot of movies about the angst of like having everything.
They have time when they're young to write and buy video cameras, and everybody else is working.
Yeah, so I never really understood it, and so and that's a part of the independent thing too, right? Like, and everybody kind of gets it. We all get it because we've all been through that experience. It's like, I haven't. I go to your movie and I'm bored because it's not about being a human being. It's about being a kid in the suburbs who gets, as far as I can see, everything they want, right? Yeah. And but that's another thing about being an independent. So they think showing you that life, and a lot of people recognize themselves in that, and they go, well, that's a story. It's like, it's not a story. It's not that I couldn't get into that. It's not that I'm a human being, but you have to explain it to me.
Right.
Because I don't get it. It's like, people love The Graduate. I'm like, I don't get it. It's not explained to me. I didn't have food. That's all I'm saying. Ooh, plastics? You know what I mean? Like, I'm supposed to care about that? I don't like it because I don't understand it. It's not for me. And I think it could be, but it isn't.
Well, that goes back to the golden theme.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to make it universal. You got to give everybody a way into it.
Yeah. Yeah, give me a hook in.
Yeah.
And so I think that people often think they have a story and they don't have one. Or a plot. And on the other end, Hollywood is all plot and no, like, you know, just have enough explosions and they think they can call it a day, you know. But it's interesting, you know, I was saying to somebody about Jaws, a movie I love, has one explosion. Right. There's one explosion in Jaws, and that explosion matters.
Right.
It matters. It's this big cathartic thing. Oh, we got the shark, and the shark exploded, and it's this big, you know, emotional thing. And I guess they did a thing on Mythbusters, and you can't do that with a tank, and it's like,
who cares?
That's not what it's about.
Right.
It's about the triumph of this, like, I conquered my fear of the water, and this is the, you know, the outward expression of that. It's funny because they don't need to have more explosions. They think, oh, we have a body count and more explosions and this and that. And they think it's about the volume, but you can't, like,
They don't matter.
They don't matter, right? So it's like, how many times do I have to sit in a theater and watch a trailer where the world blows up or this city blows up?
Blow up the White House.
I've seen everything blow up. I've seen everything be covered with a tidal wave. I've seen everything covered with ice. I've seen it. I get it. You can do that now. Please tell me a story.
Well, Hitchcock has that great thing where he says, you know, it's not about the bomb going off. It's about knowing there's a bomb that might go off.
Right, yeah.
And the character doesn't. And that's exciting. It never has to go off.
Right. Well, it has to go off later.
Right.
But it can't go off, They can throw it out the window and it goes off or whatever, right? You have to, but that's what he says. They can throw it out the window, but it never must. He does say it mustn't go off. It mustn't blow up people. That's what he does. He does say that. So.
Well, and he learned that because he did that once.
Yeah, he did it. He made that mistake in a movie once. Yeah. And he goes, oh, yeah, don't do that. So, but he also, I don't want to get into Hitchcock, so I won't get there because I love Hitchcock, but that's a sidebar. But make me care about the explosion, and you only need one. Right.
Well, I mean, to that point, you know, with the Hitchcock thing, it's like, even that, it's like, if you don't care about who's going to be affected by the explosion,
it doesn't matter.
Right, it doesn't matter. Right.
You know, you can milk it. You can still milk it. And it's like, oh no, there's suspense here. But if I don't care about who's going to be affected by the explosion, then it's like, all right, so that person I have no affinity for is dead now.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody in like a 2-mile radius, it's ridiculous. It's like, oh, the building blew up. Our hero got away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You sure that building was empty? And the building's next to it?
You know, and the body counts are weird, you know, because it's like, they're there for fun, but it's like, those people are getting killed, right? Like, that's real people really getting killed. And I think that used to matter in a story, and it doesn't seem to matter anymore. Like, how many people get killed in Jaws? Really not that many compared to how many people get killed in the movie now.
Yeah.
Right? So, not that many people get killed, but each death matters. Like the woman who gets killed at the very beginning of Jaws.
Right.
Matters. Right?
It sets the whole story up.
Yeah, and you get to know her a little bit, so you're like, not a lot, but she's a person.
Yeah.
When she dies, she's a person. She's not just a body. That, you know. I don't know why we lost that, and I don't know why people who make decisions in Hollywood think it's not important, but it's everything, you know, that you care about the people. You can't keep people away from a movie theater if they care about the people in the movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know why. I mean, they want to make money. I don't know why they don't learn that lesson. You know, I guess it's because they can fool you into going to a movie.
Yeah, well.
A nice trailer. They blow up the White House and you go.
We went and saw the last movie I saw. Like, there was like 2 trailers with almost the exact same dialogue. Mm-hmm. One with Gerard Butler and one with Colin Farrell, who may or may not be the same guy. But they're all about like, one man's coming out of retirement to save the president. It's like, did I just see this?
Right. Yeah.
Like, it was disgrace, and now he's going to prove him. It's like, oh man, really? Again?
Yeah. And they don't get at anything. You know, it's funny because that's not anything that most people have to deal with, right? So it becomes not, they put in the character thing, but it's not human because you go, well,
I almost let the president die. I know what that's like.
Yeah.
Dude, this story is this is about me.
Yeah. Or like Argo. I don't want to bag on Argo, but here's the thing about it. Argo is totally fun to watch, and like you get excited and you're into it. And, oh my God, I hope they don't get caught, right? But there's this thing in Argo that seems like, oh, aren't we supposed to have a character arc thing? And so you see that he's separated from his wife, and he has some a conversation with his kid, and at the end, he's like back with his wife, but I have no idea how that connects to the movie I just saw,
or why they broke up to begin with. Like it doesn't make it didn't need to be in there.
It's like, why is that's
it doesn't
in there.
add to the story, and it doesn't take away from the story if it wasn't there.
It's in there because aren't you supposed to have a thing? Isn't he supposed to change in some way? Right? Like it's in there as a, like they don't understand. Like shouldn't it be part of the journey? Shouldn't that have been part of the whole experience?
Yeah.
Like through that experience, he learned that family was important or something. Like. You know, or some...
Well, again, this is like the difference of working from the inside out versus working from the outside in.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, well, what does this character need to learn?
Yeah.
He needs to learn this. How's he going to learn that? As opposed to he's divorced and now he's back together.
Right. And I think that pattern makes sense to people's brains, so they think they saw a story.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, well, he didn't have, now he's with... But there's no connective tissue between those two things. There's nothing.
The only thing that separation is in there for, and like at least
they just show he's a workaholic.
No, that was the thing that I was like, oh, that was nice. Is like he was like, oh, what are you watching? Oh, I'm watching Channel 6 or whatever.
Right.
And then he switches over and he's like, I got it. We'll make a sci-fi movie.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's all I needed from that. Because like, yeah, the whole I'm back together with my family now that I got these people out of
it's like, what's that
Iran.
about?
Is like, what?
Yeah.
I learned what's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's you know, I know it won an Oscar, but it's like, really? Because they used to write Norma Ray. Now they write this. This one's an Oscar.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry. It was fun to watch, but it ends up being kind of empty.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember the moment I realized it was empty was when the guy comes over to him on the plane and shakes his hand, and I was like, oh, it's the guy with the mustache, as opposed to the guy that was really scared, or the guy that, you know,
didn't believe they could get out.
Couldn't get out. But it's like, it was, to me, it was all about like, yeah, he saves 6 people, and it's like, you know, one guy's got a mustache, one guy's got glasses, one guy's got a T-shirt, there's a girl with glasses.
Tate Donovan.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
You know, it's a sorry excuse for a great screenplay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mediocre screenplay.
But like you said, it was very entertaining.
Oh, sure.
While I was watching it.
Yeah.
But as soon as it was over, it was like, no, that was about nothing.
Yeah. It was a delicious piece of chewing gum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up.
Okay.
I was going to say, where can people find Whiteface, which is your short film that I think sort of exemplifies a lot of what we've talked about here.
Yeah, and I don't know if a lot of people listen to the commentary track on there, or tracks. There's several tracks on there, but maybe they should if they're interested. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Whiteface on Amazon.
By Brian McDonald.
Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us.
Sure.
If you're a movie lover and would like to support us, you can subscribe to the 2020 Film Club. Your annual subscription gets you into 10 of our monthly For Your Consideration screenings here in Seattle, and a ticket to our annual ceremony in February. It's over $100 value for only $40. To enroll, just visit us at 2020awards.org and look for the subscriber link. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to start thinking about the past.